Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to Myth Monday here on Where All the Ladies At. I'm stumbling over my words. It's kind of weird. Sorry, my hair is crazy. It's still wet, so it's still forming it's still forming its decision of how it wants to lay today. Anyways, welcome. This is unfortunately the last week of Women's History Month. Ooh. But it is always Women's History Month here on Where All the Ladies At. That doesn't matter. It is the last sun goddess for our myth, and then on Thursday we have our last woman who stood up against fascism. Make sure you turn into that one. It's kind of sad. It's definitely sad. Sorry, guys. All right, there we go. But it's really the woman, Sophie Scholl, is pretty badass. Even though it has a very tragic ending. Spoiler alert. If you haven't been here before, my name is Kim. I am a history nerd, a novelist. I do a whole bunch of stuff, but history is one of my big passions. I really love it. And I really thought it was time for women to get their spotlight back, because we are a huge part of the population, and yet only a handful of the ladies made it into the history books. And I just don't think that's right. There's so many amazing women out there, not only in history, but in myth and legend. And if you notice, I mean, in myth and legend, there's a little bit more female presence, but there's still a lot of things missing there. So that's why I do what I do. I love it so much. Today we're going to be talking about Shapash. I think that's how you say it. She is a Canaanite sun goddess, and as I said on Thursday, we'll be talking about Sophie Scholl, who was a member of the White Rose movement in Germany during Nazi Germany, the rise of fascism there. Because this month, because it's Women's History Month, I focused on women philosophers and women who stood up against fascism. So make sure you go back and check out. I already covered Simone de Beauvoir, I covered Hannah Arendt, and last week we did Dorothy Thompson, who was an amazing journalist who really got under the skin of the man with the funny mustache, and she got kicked out for it. So she was pretty amazing, and I'm very excited that we've got to talk about all these amazing women. That being said, let's do the typical housekeeping and shameless plugging, which is like this. If you want to reach out to me, there's ways to do that in the description box. There's also ways down there to support the podcast financially. And if you can't do that, I completely understand. After all, especially if you're in America, eggs are pretty important source of protein. And if you have to pay an arm and leg for them, that means you don't have money to kick a silly podcaster's way. So if you can't do that, at least I would really appreciate it if you would comment, share, like, follow, subscribe, all those amazing things. Anything that gets my name and face out into the algorithm so that more people get suggested my content, and we can build a community where we can talk about these amazing ladies together. And I think, oh wait, no, there's more shameless plugging. There is a meeting publication that goes along with this podcast. I also have another podcast called Our Mystic Road Trip, where I talk about tarot and crystals and herbs and ley lines and all kinds of stuff. So if you're into that stuff, head over there and check it out too. Alright, that is it for the shameless plugging and the housekeeping. So let's get into Shapash, the Canaanite, I'm going to stumble over that all of the Canaanite sun goddess. Alright. Okay, so Shapash, first off, I think we need to really kind of talk about a little about I'm looking at my notes. Sorry, guys. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about Shapash and the Canaanites. So in Canaanite mythology, First off, hold on. Why don't I have any of that in my notes? Oh my lord. My notes are unprepared. Unprepared. So guess what? Alright, so alright, so alright guys, so let's get started on talking about Shapash. So of course Canaan is basically where Israel was, was. That's a weird statement. So we're going to give you, I'm really going to move around that because I don't really want to discuss that area of the world right now, if you understand where I'm going. So we're going to just jump into Shapash. So in Canaanite mythology, she might have been called Shapshu or Shapsh. I think I'm saying, but she was the sun goddess, right? And literally her name means sun. I'm sorry if you hear that. Apparently there's some construction going on in the Ugaritic language. So torch of the gods, lamp of the gods. This translation basically shows that she was kind of like the divine light source, right? And unlike, as I've said in all the other sun goddess ones, unlike the other like mythologies where the sun is primarily a masculine entity, in the Canaanite mythology the sun was feminine, and that's why. I mean, obviously the sun is an important part of the daily life and really has control of the cosmic balance, but Shapash was more than just the sun goddess, right? She was the royal messenger for the high god El. And that was kind of like her father, so it was a little nepo. She's kind of a little bit of a nepo baby, but she was a reliable messenger, and El, the supreme god of the Canaanite pantheon, relied on her to deliver messages and judgments. Right? She was kind of like a neutral party between warring gods and the mortals and everybody. She was like this neutral figure that was just there to like deliver the message. She had no skin in the game, really. She really did play an important part in a lot of those epic conflicts between the divinities, and those included things like with Baal and Mot. Baal went missing, and Shapash was the one that guided his sister Anat. I'm making sure I recognize to retrieve him. Yeah, like so she said, "Hey Baal, not follow me. I'm going to show you where Baal is." When Baal returned to the land of the living, it was her who really illuminated the path for them to get there. Also, you have to look at the nightly journey to the underworld, right? So she has this, right? The sun begins its descent, and as night approaches, Shapash actually kind of goes on a nightly journey. She, but she doesn't get any rest. She doesn't get to lay her head down because she still has to work, right? She descends into the underworld, and then that guides spirits and the dead into that area. So basically, she illuminates the dark realms, and that's kind of like how she gets her role in the cycle of life and death, right? She is the bridge between the two worlds. The underworld world is ruled by Mot in this mythology, and it was kind of a really scary place, right? Shadowy place. But Shapash, because of her light, really goes down deep into it, offers light to the souls, and in doing so, she really becomes also a symbol of hope, right? And it's kind of a reminder that even during the darkest times, right? There's always, the sun's going to rise. There's going to be another day most of the time. Okay, there's one time of your life where there will not be another day. I know that's kind of morbid, but it's true. But for the most part, even in the darkest times, there's going to be light that comes through, right? So she really is this goddess. Once again, another dual role, right? And that's why when the sun is attached to a goddess, it becomes a duality thing. Because if you look at other cultures who have a masculine god, sun deities, they're really focused only on the living, right? But Shapash, because of the tendency to give goddesses dual roles, she now has this other aspect where she is the dual. She is life, and she does help with death, right? It wasn't just about growth and vitality with her. It was like she is an important part of the natural order of things, right? Like I said, the dual symbolism is something that's kind of unique. Here's the thing. When you look at gods, right, no matter what mythos you are, there doesn't tend to be a dual nature, right? Maybe a little, like, they can take life and they can give life, but it's not like they have that duality like goddesses do, right? For some reason, when the ancient peoples were building their mythos out, women had a dual nature. And I think that's very interesting, right? She was not only somebody who brought growth and fertility and prosperity, but she also had to do with, the perilous journey into the underworld after death, right? She guided those souls. And that's kind of a big thing, She is maybe one of the most complex figures in Canaanite mythology. Now, I want to really preface this I want to go back real quick and say, like, this is just through archaeological evidence and what they've decided. Obviously, we weren't there in the time. We haven't invented a time machine. This is just kind of conjecture. But from everything that's been looked at about her, she seems to be a very complex figure, right? And that's pretty amazing, And speaking about archaeology, right? So she was this actively worshipped deity, right, of the people of ancient Canaan. And because of this, there was some very big tangible evidence that this was the truth. Archaeological discoveries have included like amulets and inscriptions, religious artifacts, and they all kind of indicate that people really went after and looked for her guidance and protections. She had an influence that extended beyond mythology and really was part of the everyday life of these peoples, right? Some of the amulets bring her image or symbols associated with her into light, and they were probably worn so that they could be protected or ensured safe travel during the day, and all that kind of stuff. Her worship was likely tied to the rhythms and natural world, is what kind of most people think. Sunrise, sunset, right? Big days for her. Some even believe that prayers and offerings were made to ensure that she continued to fulfill her role. So in other words, like, hey, I'm going to do this so that the sun will rise again. For those that lived in this time period, the sun was definitely more than just that big orange ball in the sky. It had this presence. It was important. It could bless, it could curse, or it could just leave, right? And so by honoring her, the worshipers really looked to maintain that balance of life. I think that's something we've seen in all of the sun goddesses that we've talked about this month, is that people really worshiped them because they wanted to make sure that they wouldn't lose the light. But here's the thing, they also wanted to not get the raise the ire of this goddess either, because what happens if the sun blazes too hot for too long? Droughts, right? It's just as bad. So they had to keep that balance in order to keep these goddesses appeased. Now, what I really want to talk about, because this is a podcast specifically targeted for women. I mean, men can listen too. It's always good to for men to join in, but it is like a woman podcast about women, right? So I always like to look at what it was like for women in those things, and I'm trying to love a new format. It works. It's interesting because as I'm diving into these older cultures and stuff, I'm seeing more and more that women had a lot more power and prestige. Now, obviously, they weren't like the main figure, but they had a lot more than they did even in the 17 and 1800s, which is weird. So it's almost like there was something that happened, and at some point, women's rights stepped back into an antiquated system, and then we had to fight to get out of it, right? Because here in this Canaanite civilization, they really did women held important and respected positions, especially in the religious field, right? When you look at the field, goddesses like Asherah and Shapash were not just like background figures, they were major figures. They were central to the belief system. And that meant that people worshiped them, they valued them, they influenced women. So the presence, because of these female deities, suggests that women probably played key roles in the temples, priestesses, spiritual leaders, maybe even oracles, On top of that, historical and archaeological evidence suggests that women were involved in religious rites, ceremonies. This would have given them a level of social status and authority, especially in those matters, right? Beyond religious, though, women in Canaanite may have had more autonomy than in later civilizations. Men often dominated warfare and political affairs here, but women had respectful roles like caretakers, healers, wisdom keepers. Because there was an emphasis on goddess worship in the Canaanite culture, it probably was that femininity was associated with power, protection, knowledge. So it just seems kind of weird to me that just 100 years ago we had to fight for our rights, but these ladies had more rights than some of the ladies had in, like I said, in the 17, 18, 1900s. It's so strange. I have some theories on what happened, but I will leave those for another day. All right, so let's talk about it. We're going to, she obviously had a lot. She was a force that shaped a lot of different things. The fate of gods, the fate of mortals. She played a crucial role as a mediator, like I said. She escorted souls into the underworld. She was like eternal cycle of existence, all of this, right? So the endless cycle of life and death was very important. So with that being said, it is now time, and that's basically all. Let's skip. Hold on. That's basically a lot about Shapash. So now we're going to jump into the story. I will tell you this is a modern interpretation of the story, because obviously there's not like definitive ideas, and I would like you guys to all know this when I'm doing these stories. Sometimes they are exactly what they are, and sometimes because there's not a lot of information, I have to kind of dream up some stories. And this is basically a modern interpretation of Shapash and the Shadow King, so Mott. Here we go. So as usual, grab your beverage of choice, whether that be a cocktail or a cocoa. Grab a blanket, get curled up. Let's go. Long ago, before time had settled into the steady rhythms of days and nights, the world was cloaked in twilight. There was no true day and no true night, only a dim, eternal dusk that stretched out across the land. The gods looked down upon this half-lit world and saw that it lacked balance. It was neither fully alive nor truly at rest. El, the great god of the heavens, called upon Shapash, the brightest among the divine. "Take your place in the sky," he commanded. "Shine upon the earth so that life may flourish. But know this, where there is light, there must also be darkness. You will not only rule the day, but must journey into the realm of the dead each night, so that balance of all things remains." Shapash bowed her golden head and ascended in the sky, her radiant form banishing the early twilight. Flowers turned toward her, rivers gleamed with her reflection, and the people of the earth lifted their faces in gratitude. But as the first evening approached, she felt the weight of her duty. She had to descend into the underworld, a place where no light had ever dared to shine. As she stepped into the realm of the dead, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Mot, the Shadow King, ruler of the underworld. His form was as deep as the void, his eyes hollow, his voice like a whisper of forgotten souls. "Why do you come here, daughter of light?" he asked. "I come because it is my duty," Shapash answered. "The world must know both life and death, and I am the bridge between them." Mott laughed, a sound like dry leaves scattering in the wind. "You may bring light to the living, but the dead belong to me. If you shine too brightly here, you will disturb the slumber of my kingdom." Shapash understood his warning. She dimmed her glow, allowing only the faintest light to guide the lost souls who wandered the underworld. Some had strayed from their path, afraid to cross fully into the next world. With a gentle hand, Shapash led them forward, ensuring they reached their rightful place. Each night she returned to Mot's domain, and each morning she rose again to shine upon the world. Over time, the two deities came to understand one another. Shapash did not challenge Mot's rule, and Mot did not seek to extinguish her light. They were opposite forces, but together they maintained the sacred balance of existence. And so the cycle continued, Shapash rising to give life, then descending to guide the dead. The people of the earth, watching her daily journey, came to see her as more than just the sun. She was a guardian, a protector, and a reminder that even in darkness there is always a path forward. Thus the world came to know day and light, life and death, and the endless cycle of rebirth. And Shapash, the goddess who walked between both realms, remained a constant presence, a divine thread woven into the very fabric of existence. And that's it. That's the story. It's a simple story, but one that really shows how the Canaanites viewed life and death and rebirth and such. So that's it. That's it for Shapash. That's it for sun goddesses. Maybe we'll take another tour into some sun goddesses at a later date. But that's it for this month. I hope you enjoyed learning about the sun goddesses. I hope you enjoyed learning about Shapash today. If you haven't seen the other ones, make sure you go back. Some of those sun goddesses are pretty badass. So I highly suggest you check them out. And that's it for Mythical Monday, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope Shapash kind of inspired you. It gave you a little insight into another mythology that basically is not really talked about much unless you're a scholar of that area. So I hope you enjoyed. And as always, guys, if you want to reach out to me, there's ways to do that through my social media and such in the description box. There's also ways to support, as I said at the beginning, the podcast financially through Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon. If you can't, if you just follow, share, subscribe, shout it from the rooftops, send it to people, whatever you want to do, just to get everything out there so that we can start building a community to have lovely conversations about some of these badass ladies. If you want more on this badass goddess or others, make sure you check out my Medium publication. And if you're into magical, mystical, spiritual, wellness, holistic kind of stuff, check out my other podcast called Our Mystic Road Trip. There's a link to that as well. And that's it, guys. As always, stay curious, stay blessed, stay safe. See you next week.